Not much was going on, Craig.
How are you?
Good, man.
So, guys, we're going to make this up as we go along, right? Because we've had no preparation. But then again, we all know these topics like the back of our hand, don't we, really?
Am I still on mute?
You're not. I can hear you. Strabian's on mute. He's just talking to himself.
No, I'm in an airport.
Oh, yeah, quite right.
Well, I'm always talking to myself, but I'm in an airport, so I'm going to try to mute when I'm not on.
Oh, nice look, Brian.
Thank you. Very.
Oh, we're live, guys. We're live, I think. So, just so welcome to everybody who can hear the hangout. We were just having a conversation there about the fact that some of us are sitting at home, some of us in the office, and Brian Strabian has very kindly joined us from an airport, which is why he has 53 and 52 behind his head. I don't know what that means. Is that your score? It's not your age, is it? No.
No. Thanks, Richard.
So we have a lot of great panelists, but we have a relatively short period of time. So I'm going to crack on. For the introductions, on my left of the screen, as I'm looking at it, we have Andrew Patterson. He's the director of new media at Major League Baseball, Advanced Media. He oversees their social products, strategy, and partnerships for the MLB. Next, we have Brian in the airport. He's his 5th season as the director of digital media for the Giants, San Francisco Giants, and he's also the adjunct professor of the University of San Francisco Sports Management Program. Craig comes next, Craig Howe. He's done lots in various capacities with advising most of the major U.S. sports leagues and an awful lot of the professional sports teams as well. He's currently working with the Vikings, Minnesota Vikings, the Denver Broncos, and the San Francisco 49ers. So I guess the playoffs and the Super Bowl opportunities are made of him. Mike, we have Mike is the CEO of SnappyTV, which is a live cloud-based content production platform. Lots of sports rights holders are using it and use it to amplify highlights and game summaries and social and mobile audiences. And then last but not least, we have Scott Kegley, who is the senior manager of digital and social media for the 49ers, and he's been with the team since 2006 and oversees the 49ers digital content and all their social efforts. And my name is Richard Ayers, and I run a company called 7 League, and our focus is on accelerating the digital performance of pretty much anybody in sport. We do an awful lot of stuff across various European and international sports, working with Major League Soccer and Arsenal and Man City and a whole bunch of other guys as well. I also am quite aware that I'm the only European on here, so at the moment this is the US versus the rest of the world, and I'm going to try and represent cricket, rugby, football, and all those other sports out there. Guys, to kick off, there's an awful lot of issues that we could talk about. One that I wanted to pick up on, really, and just sort of dive straight into, is that nature of what you do when you're losing. We talk about having a game plan, and it's easy when you're winning because everybody loves the team and there's a lot of passion and intensity around sport. But when things go badly, and we had a client recently, the England cricket team got beaten 5-0 by the Australians in the Ashes, and it was murder. It wasn't even a close 5-0, and it's a really challenging environment when you're not just losing a bit but losing really badly. So I got who to start with. Scott, can you kick us off on that one? Just tell us, what do you do? I mean, I realize the 49ers never lose, but
yeah, recently we've been having a lot of success. I have been with the team, though, since 2006. And, you know, the good thing about football really is that there's always a period of time where there's something to talk about. There really isn't an off season, which is, I guess, good for us. There's really, and when you're having failure as a football team, what we do is we can't really hide from it. So if the team's not performing to their best, some of the things that we can also talk about are kind of some of the fan initiatives. We have a show that'll be starting next year called The Faithful, so really kind of highlighting some of the fan stories. And we have a very, very passionate fan base, so that's something. One thing that we can always talk about, and then looking forward to the draft. That's one of those things in the off season that I was talking about, and how can the team get better? How can they improve? And then the issues on the field too. We need to talk about those as well. Obviously, you're coming at it from a team point of view, but that's still something that fans are going to want to know about, and they care passionately about, and they want to hear their team address those issues and not pretend like they don't exist.
Okay, yeah. And Brian, from the Giants' perspective, I'm just thinking, well, we still got you as you're in an airport. How do you deal with that same kind of approach? You go deeper into the team, or do you back away and sort of the shutters come down?
Well, and we're coming off of, 2012 we won a World Series. In 2013 didn't win World Series, and quite honestly did not live up to the expectations of us or the fans. So there's a number of things that I think are very important. The first is obviously, which we all talk about in social, is listening. Your fans, part of being a fan is that passion and being able to voice not just when you're happy, but also when you're frustrated, and that's part of being a fan. And I think teams need to do a better job of listening to their fans, and I think like most businesses in the United States, they learn from their customers. They learn during tough times. But I think also, being transparent, and I think Scott mentioned this, don't pretend like everything's rosy and you're just going as business as usual. In social, it's a newly created, rule book in where we're speaking with a voice. And I think that voice, in part, has to empathize with the fans. Scott, you mentioned this, creating content in and around the team. And baseball, we have 162 games. And all of us are telling a story. It's a season-long story. There's, moments of greatness throughout that season that you highlight. You're establishing your characters throughout that story, the 25 members of your team. And not to mention the non-baseball events. We have a number of Heritage Days. We have Metallica Night. We had a tribute to Bruce Lee. We have a number of community initiatives. There's so much content that is happening in and around the season that it's part of that, your season's, or rather your franchise's history. And not all those seasons are going to end up with a world championship or even the playoffs, but I think there's definitely a lot to build upon. And then as you get to the end of the season, yes, you start to look to the next season and give your fans that insight that they desire to see what's going in and around. Because again, our fans have that ownership stake in the team, so they want to be a part of that at the top as well as when you're building from the bottom.
Okay. Cool.
Hey, Richard, just interject one thing. I think it also depends on when you're losing. If you look at, I did some work for the Tampa Bay Rays, and that team historically starts very slow, and they've 2 years in a row finished really strong the last few days of or the last month of the season. In fact, they were down to the Yankees on the last game of the season 8-0. So Brian talks about the history of the team. Sometimes if you're losing, you can play on the history of that actually being a positive, and that your team has been here before, and please don't give up on us because we still have a chance to make a run to make it into the postseason. Okay.
I think there's always a practical reality, though, isn't there? Sometimes you just get to a point where all you can do is put your hands up and say, it's not going well. What can we do? And you hope they're going to support you. But the one thing you can't do is keep going with the, commercial promotion sometimes, or the rah-rah, hey, we're going, now we're going to show you something funny. It just, that kind of distraction doesn't really necessarily work. Talking about distraction briefly, and maybe this is something actually, Andrew, you might want to come in on. There tends to be, I've heard a number of clubs and a number of governing bodies start to say, well, we can't control social like we would want to, and we can't monetize it, and we can't generate business value out of it as much as we want to, so we're going to use it as a traffic driver. And solely as a traffic driver, just sort of funnel the traffic back in towards the main property, because they don't want that distraction. They want to be able to control the environment on the main home website. Where do you stand on that?
I'd say from our standpoint, we don't necessarily try to control the conversation. We try to organize it, and I think that's the biggest thing we try to do on social. If there's 10 million fans out, if there's 10 million fans on various accounts, we're just one voice, and the best thing that we can do is provide a window to other fans into that. I definitely think as a traffic driver, it's amazing. The opportunity to reach so many fans in so many different spectrums where they are, and give them content and bring them back is definitely one thing that we try to do. As far as the monetization, I think the jury's still out on that one. It's something that we're all learning. Just mentioning, I know Brian with their At Cafe, they've kind of had an installation now in their park where they have, they have a social media center. and that's sponsored for them. So I'd say that there's a way to do it. I think the first thing to remember is always fans first. That take with that, I think opportunities to monetize it will come and they will grow.
Okay, so if you, as a rule of thumb, if you were talking about the scale of the audience, 'cause quite a lot of the time you deal with smaller clubs or smaller bodies, and they just haven't got enough audience to really drive that traffic, And so, two questions: what's the sort of the base minimum that you need to be at on? I don't know. You pick a number, Twitter number or a Facebook number. Do you need to be at 1 million followers or fans to really make a difference? To change the dial in terms of driving traffic, and is there a sort of ratio to the amount of fans or followers you have in social, and therefore the amount of reward you'll get on your main properties?
We try to change how we looked at it. We saw there's a lot of numbers on fans, there's a lot of numbers on engagement, and so what we try to do is a relative metric, and we look at engagement per fan. So how good are you at activating the audience you have? It's the way I look at it is like a concert. If you have a concert that holds 20,000 people and you've got 10,000 people clapping, that may not be as good as a concert that has 9,000 people and 9,000 people clapping. One's a lot more engaging than the other, and so we try to look at those relative metrics for doing it. I'd say if you're doing a good job, as everyone's been kind of talking about, being able to connect with that fan one-on-one, I think each of those moments is special to that fan. And what you're doing is you're winning the battle one at a time. Every time a fan sees something they really engage with, or they get a tweet or a retweet from a brand, it really means a lot to them. And I think it's almost a one-by-one thing. And then over the course of time, more people come in. They know that the team's listening to them, the team's talking back and forth to them. And I think there's a lot of value out there just beyond what happens there, and that's how we have to kind of look at it on a larger basis, is really being able to connect and have that voice and conversation with our fans.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, one of my guys used to work for, spent the last 10 years at Sony Music, and he was saying they used to start communities of new bands who were coming in through with maybe 10 fans. Maybe 10 fans of another band, work those 10, build it up, and kind of, build it into hundreds of thousands by the time you get to the end. It really, that close attention is important, isn't it? That revenue point, actually, that's something I'd like to bring you in on, Mike, because Snappy I've seen the tool, I've been really impressed by it in terms of really that sort of ability to be able to do stuff real time and really quick, the immediacy of the media and get it out. Is it something also, I remember hearing people using it to be able to drive revenue specifically, or to be able to drive traffic back to the TV maybe, or how's it being used?
It's being used in a number of different ways. In the team kind of context, I think it's very interesting how some of the teams, some of the leagues and college conferences have used SnappyTV. So what it is it's just, think of it as a very simple video editor based in the cloud. So I'm watching my soccer match, there's a goal, I can clip that and instantly push that out to my Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, YouTube, wherever I want to engage my audience. And then I can have call to action that says either watch this game live now or buy a ticket, or whatever call to action that you want to drive as a business back. But one of the interesting things, we were working with the Pac-12 very early last year, and they were tweeting out football highlights from the @Pac-12 moniker. And one of the things that they got is every time they tweeted that out, they would get a bunch of engagement and actually a bunch of follows, but they would also get a spike in unfollows. It was smaller, but it was there. And what we kind of learned is that if it's a Stanford-Cal game and you're tweeting out Stanford touchdowns, Cal fans don't necessarily like that. And so what we actually built is the ability for the rights holder to syndicate the rights to edit to their partners, which in this case would be the team in the conference, or perhaps like a league and a team concept. And so the place to tweet from is actually really interesting, because if the Stanford Twitter account is basically this barrage of these great highlights, it's the story of the team, whereas the Cal might as well be a different game, right? It's an entirely different set of highlights, entirely different set of insights. And so by breaking that up and taking this media right, and pushing it into the ability for the right people to distribute it, you've actually created this environment where you're pushing the right content to the right people, and the engagement metrics far exceed what you do from a league level. So it's very the right content to the right people at the right time is what we found to be really one of the good recipes inside social.
Do you think, and this is one to the group, are we focusing too much on a provision of content? And is that a little bit sort of old school broadcast media thinking? Should we be thinking more about social aggregation, mass collaboration, about getting the contributions from fans and people, whether they be at the game or at home, and harvesting that? Is there more of that to be going on?
Well, you have to do a combination of it. You can't have one thing. You can't have just a stream of highlights or a stream of images. I think you need to do a combination, and probably some of these other guys are better suited to say what that other mix of content is. But we are one tool in your bag in terms of how to engage your audience.
Scott, give me an idea from the 49ers. Content creation versus sort of aggregation, curation, and working with the audience. What's the balance?
Well, now it's actually a perfect time to really talk about that, especially for us, because playoffs are one time where fans really want to be a part of that conversation, and it's something that we really started last year, and it was fairly successful. So we carried it over to the playoffs this year. Was our Quest for Six campaign. So that's where we're actively taking photos and videos from fans that upload. We have a Quest for Six badge. Encourage people to change their profile icons on Instagram and on Twitter and kind of be a part, and that's been our message, is to join the Quest for Six. And it's a time that people really want to be heard, and I think fans also kind of want to feel like celebrities, a kind of a celebrity fan to some extent when they see their photo retweeted or up on 49ers.com. That gets them fired up, and it's kind of justification for their fanhood. And this is a perfect, I don't think that you necessarily are doing that 24/7, but when it makes sense and when it's particularly relevant, I think that's when you really embrace the conversation. And it's been successful so far, and knock on wood, we can keep things going.
Okay, I'm good. Craig, I just wondered if you got any experience from some of the other teams you've been working with on that one?
Yeah, I would say, to Scott's point, it really depends on the time of the year. There's great times to harness fan emotion, because obviously that's what you want to get from fans, is real emotional content that's going to mean a lot to the larger fan base. The other thing that I always am a little bit nervous about is curation. So do you have the time, the resources, the right manner to curate that content? Because sometimes an abundance comes in, but only a certain amount will meet the quality standard that the team or the league wants to put on their social channels. And the last thing is, a lot of times people will consider user-generated content as part of a sponsor-fueled program or something that does involve brand partners. I get a little bit nervous about any sort of expectations on assigning numbers to any fan-generated content campaigns, because you just never know the amount of quality submissions that you are going to get, or the amount of submissions you're going to get at all, for that matter. So it's a little bit of the roll the dice. So I always sort of look at it as great secondary content, but if it is good and it's very emotive, you can kind of push it to the front as primary content.
Yeah, and there's a time sensitivity here, isn't there? There's the ability to be able to react, the ability to be able to sort of contribute and be sensitive, but also be sensitive quickly. It's one of the things that often that's a huge resource, factor in there as well. In terms of that ability to be able to fuel the resource, and it's a really obvious factor here is straightforward. How many heads do you have in your team? What's the structure of your team? Now, more established, bigger businesses who have a belief in it will resource more fully. There's lots of bodies in the UK, and we've been doing some work with UEFA across all the European federations recently. Most of the time, they've got maybe half a PR guy, or a quarter of a marketing guy who's responsible for doing their social media stuff. And it's really difficult to say, yeah, be responsive, but by the way, it's only a quarter of your time, and you need to do it 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. Are there techniques around that? Is it about using the community, or using trusted members, or about spreading it across the team? Or how do you structure it in a way that means that you can keep it alive and you're not going to lose it to just sheer numbers? I'm going to put that question. Let's come back to Brian. Brian, what do you do? How big's your team? You've got an army. You've got an army, haven't you?
An army of now 2 people. It's been me for a long time. I think to address it, each team needs, in baseball's a little different than football than others, but I think we're all evolving. For example, our publications department has been mostly focused on print. You know, everything from, you know, magazines to starting to create, you know, online graphics for ticket sales and whatnot. But we're slowly transitioning into, okay, you know, let's create things specifically for Facebook or for Instagram. So I believe that you know, as we move forward, you're going to look at these channels differently, and you know, Vine is a great example, and Instagram is another example. I mean, these are things that I might use, but then you think about it, I'm not a quote-unquote photographer or an artist. These are things that our video department should be adapting, our photographers should be adapting, because they're the ones that are the experts in this field, adjusting with the tools. So for me, it's more of a training and an evolution internally. As for staffing, yeah, I think you get what you put in. So we're slowly starting to grow. We're adding a second person this year. And strategically, you know, you can't do everything, but your focus is on what's important to your organization. And yeah, we're trying to build up our content strategy. We have a strong video department. We're trying to grow more internally with our in-game presence, and from there, you know, and hopefully, and we've alluded to sponsorship and whatnot, but as we continue to bring more added value to not just what we're doing in the digital side, but, you know, when sponsorship starts to really take off, then I think that's when most teams are going to start to really invest more in their social media teams or digital media teams.
So this is where I really wish I could turn to somebody else in Europe or in the other parts of the world. Some people have said to me that you American guys, you have it easy, right? Because your audience is used to social media. You've got agencies coming out of your ears. You've got tools left, right, and center. You've got a venture capital community that expects it, and you'll have management structures inside your teams who, when you say social media, they know what you mean, right? And then they believe in it. So relative, and actually, to your point, Brian, about sponsorship, and you've got sponsors who know what they want out of social. So it's you can work with that, right? So I mean, what are you all whinging about? No. So is there a fundamental challenge there that's about the rate of growth and acceleration? I mean, you said it's an evolution. I hope not, because that's millions of years and an awful lot of things going wrong. But is there really that that growth towards revenue? It's really a question of how quick can we move towards revenue, and what are you hearing from sponsors? Maybe that's an angle. Actually, Andrew, you might have done a whole bunch of work, I think, with sponsors around how they get involved in the sport and through that social media.
Yeah, we have. I mean, it's interesting to kind of to both your points. I think it's an evolving kind of process. We start out the same thing where we kind of have to fight the same battles. You know, as there are new social platforms that evolve, how do we kind of integrate them? You know, Brian had mentioned Instagram, and I think Instagram's a really you know, kind of an interesting example where you have an app where people are taking photos. Now we're finding that, you know, it's easy for fans to send in photos. That's content that works really well to kind of post. You know, we'll go and then we'll put that on the Jumbotron. And so the Jumbotron's an opportunity that's sponsored now, so it's a perfect kind of segue to a sponsorship opportunity there. And it's really just finding what on these platforms kind of works and kind of moves. As far as sponsors, I think it's been evolving for sponsors as well. You know, yesteryear they wanted, you know, maybe just a Facebook post or a Twitter post, and now they're looking for integrated campaigns. I think you saw Bank of America did a Vine as a campaign. You know, during the World Series, actually, we did a small Vine for Budweiser, and you know, they really liked it. They put it up on a Jumbotron in Times Square, and that's using you know, social properties to find ways to add value. And so that's what we're doing. You know, as the mediums evolve, we have to find new ways to deliver content and value to sponsors. And it may not look like something that we've seen before, but as we kind of test it out internally on our side, then we have a case study to kind of move. You know, last year for the final vote for the All-Star, to vote the final person in from the AL and the NL side for the All-Star, we put that vote on Twitter. You know, we had 1.5 million votes on Twitter in the span of 5 hours. And so now those are numbers, you know, for a sponsor that potentially wants reach, that potentially wants engagement. That gives them something and an idea of what is possible. And so we may use that to kind of build a program in the future or do other things.
Yeah, we just recently did a Vine for and an Instagram video for the BBC Sports Personality of the Year, big annual. It's not a sports event, but it is about the sports industry, and it was interesting for me to see the BBC wanting to move into new territories, new platforms, try new things, a little bit of different, and integrate it with the broadcast production. And that was the key thing, was seeing that broadcasters, traditionally broadcasters, not wanted to integrate social too much. A few polls here and there, maybe. A little bit of, almost like phone-in, where people say, oh, and they read out a Twitter comment, but maybe that's about it. But starting to seeing that being integrated a bit more is really interesting.
We're seeing, I can kind of talk to what we're doing in terms of the monetization side, because we've been working, a year ago, Twitter launched their Amplify platform with the March Madness tournament. And essentially what that is take these key moments that are happening on television and push them to Twitter instantaneously, within seconds of those moments happening, brought to you by an advertiser. And that has worked extremely well because it fits really well. You're not shoehorning in kind of an advertiser where it's not supposed to be. This is a brand that's wanting to associate itself with the content the same way they do on the Jumbotron or on the television. And what the Amplify does is it basically says, okay, these are the moments that everybody's talking about, and they're talking about them on Twitter. And so we're going to take those moments, integrate an advertisement, and then package that up with maybe a broadcast buy, or basically the same way that they're currently buying other properties. And so it's really worked well as an integrated ad unit inside social, and that has really driven kind of the focus, not only from Twitter but also from a lot of these rights holders that we work with.
Okay. Guys, anybody else got a good sponsorship integration example they might have seen recently?
Well, Richard, I would jump in here because I think you've hit on a great topic. I don't necessarily have a specific example, but I think there's two emerging schools of thought. One school of thought is that sponsors are powering social, as you've seen, Mike talk about with SnappyTV and their ability to power real-time highlights. So sponsors are bringing fans that experience as soon as it happens through social. The other school of thought is really using social as a lead-in or teaser copy to drive to an owned website experience. So, I mean, when it comes to monetization, I think both of those are starting to show success. It's just a matter of which one makes more sense to your league or your team to pursue. Or there's no reason you can't pursue both.
Yeah, I often find that one of the things to do is I'm often encouraging teams to spend time with their sales guys and as well as with their potential partners and sponsors, because quite a lot of the time there's a sort of misunderstanding about what you can achieve and how you can achieve it, and they just look at fundamental big numbers and say, oh well, you've got 45 million followers on Facebook, Manchester United, actually it's more than that now, and then they assume that actually you'll be able to communicate to all that base, right, regardless of edge rank in Facebook's case, and then they sort of think there's going to be an effectiveness there that then it isn't necessarily, and maybe integrating those campaigns a lot better can be a lot more worthwhile. Just to pull a comment off Twitter that somebody, Dale Johnson, he's just asked, how do you begin to convince a sponsor to invest without first-hand evidence of the effectiveness? So when you're really starting off on that journey, how do you kind of get them going?
If I can interject, I guess there's two ways that we do it. The first way is that you kind of just have to take the onus on yourself and prove it out. As I kind of mentioned, the final vote for Twitter is something that we've done in 2 years. The first year we had 500,000 people vote. Last year we had 1.5 million, and we keep on growing that. And so what we use is that, again, the point of social really is to authentically engage with your fans, and regardless of whether a sponsor is there or not, you have to have an authentic experience that communicates with them. And if you can do that, then that's what sponsors want. When sponsors come, to baseball, what they want to do is activate a baseball audience. And the question to us is, how do we activate that audience? And so I think that's where we kind of prove it out first. The second thing I think is, what you mentioned about sponsors is that, you have 45 million people and they assume that you can talk to all 45 million. I guess a question that's still being answered in social, and that's kind of what's going to push how much sponsorship you get in there, is what's the value of these things? What's the value of a retweet? What's the value of a like? What's the value of someone submitting a photo? And there's no real numbers for that. I know in a TV setting it's a Nielsen rating. On a digital setting it may be click-through rates. to the point of driving the site, then we have numbers there. But on social, what's the value of those numbers? And I think that's something that we're still trying to understand. We understand it's a conversation, and I think that's why, for a lot of reasons, it's very marketing focused. As we can understand what drives those numbers and what they mean to sponsors, I think that's where we'll start to see more value pulled out, because at the end of the day, successful campaign is where both sides end up happy. And if the sponsor knows what they're getting and they feel that the value that they've received is worth what they're paying, I think then we have a relationship that we can kind of build on. And so that's what we try to do. And I think that's one of the things that will drive more of those sponsors signing on.
Yeah, the guys that we often work with of all the different shapes and sizes, I'm forever saying to them, all digital products are about reach, retention, revenue, and it's just really a question of which phase you're in and where you're focusing. And
exactly.
If that sounds like you're saying, Andrew, we're sort of, maybe we've been in reach, we've been about getting numbers, and now it's more about, some of that retention and engagement, understanding, with the revenue beginning to kind of come up. Maybe 2014-15 will be the year where the revenue really starts to sort of pile in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Scott, tell me about your sponsorship and integration and broadcast and how they work together, because 49ers Studios is, it's a pretty tight media unit.
Yeah, all of our content creation groups really are within one house, and that's under the 49ers Studios umbrella, which is really, I think, unique and different compared to a lot of other teams. And we're really going to be using all those assets, especially going forward in terms of sponsorship opportunities. So everything going forward is going to be kind of tied to a piece of content. So you mentioned kind of how you pitch that to sponsors. We're going to be sitting down with our sponsors and kind of pitching, all these new properties that we'll be having going forward, because we're also moving into a new stadium and a new building and be taking on a lot of the production capabilities all in-house going forward. So how does that make sense for a sponsor? So trying to find, and the example I always use is the Coors Light Cold Hard Facts. Really, no fan necessarily sees that come up on SportsCenter and is obscure because they're being hit over the head by a sponsor, but it's relevant content for that block of programming. And so that's going to be how we approach a lot of our sponsorship. So kind of talking to Craig's point, we're going to be using that more as a wick, social as a wick to get people to sponsored opportunities on the main site. So we're kind of a little bit more in that school of thought.
Cool. Craig, did you want to come in on that one?
Not really, Richard. I'll let you. We have limited time, so I'll let you move on to the next topic.
I'm just gonna shout out to our organizer for a second. If you can just let me know how much time we have left, that'd be great. I think we have about 10 minutes. Is that right? Something like that. Okay. Well, we'll keep going. I want to talk a little bit about live experience. Social integration and live experience. If Manchester City, my alma mater, if Manchester City works on the basis of the 47,000 people they can get into the stadium, that's a pretty small business, really. You need to be looking at extending the stadium, about a stadium beyond the stadium, about the way of using social for the live experience, both maybe in the stadium and out of the stadium. Now, I'm going to come across to Brian here, because I know you guys have been doing lots of work with this kind of integration. Tell us about live stadium experience and social, Brian.
Yeah, it's a two-way conversation, I think, for us, literally, because the experience at AT&T Park is part of the Giants brand. So, with 40,000 fans, we've sold out almost 250 games. I apologize for the airport stuff, but that's part of my experience, right? We want to share what's going in and around the ballpark with everyone outside the ballpark that's following on social media, and that's part of the fan-generated content that's so big. But one thing that we really addressed last year was the fans in the ballpark. We want to provide that experience for them and give them that, we've said it before, the second screen experience. We started by posting Instagram up on our video board. We posted tweets on the video board, and we thought we needed more, and that's why we created the @Cafe, which is a social media zone in the ballpark. And throughout the game, fans can see what's trending. Fans can see not only what's going on in and around the ballpark, but also, as far as United Kingdom or even Australia, if there's Giant fans there. We're looking to maximize that. We have a naming rights sponsor. There's a sponsorship opportunity there. Typically, our sponsors of events can put up event-driven content up there. So we're really experimenting with bringing the social conversation into the live experience, and I've seen a number of sporting events do this as well, and it adds to the experience when you're at the game. And I know, Scott, you mentioned this earlier, fans want to see themselves up. It's the kiss cam, right? Everyone wants to see themselves on kiss cam, on dance cam. It's a statement of who you are. Our motto has been, together we're the Giants, and this year it's all together. And so again, it brings all of our fans together, no matter where they are, and it's part of the entertainment that we're bringing inside the ballpark experience.
Cool. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd love to kind of interject on that one and just really quickly say that if you look at, Richard, in your world, FC Barcelona has 51 million Facebook fans, 10 million Twitter followers. How many of those people are ever actually going to get to Barcelona Stadium to watch a game? Sitting here with the Denver Broncos, they have over 2 million Facebook fans. Over 3/4 of those don't even live in the state of Colorado. So I would actually say, as social media practitioners, it's our responsibility to capture that live event experience in every way possible and bring it to all those fans that follow on social that'll never get a chance to actually watch the team play live. So I think it's every bit as important to capture that live event experience and bring it out in digital and social channels in every way possible.
Yeah. And let me just add one quick thing. I mean, the other important part, and I've always believed this, is we want to foster that fan content. It means we can tell people how great the experience is, but it's worth 10 times more if your fans are actively sharing Instagram photos and videos and Twit pics and Facebook likes and check-ins on their experience. It's to us, it's the ultimate word of buzz. Or word of mouth, that you want your fans to share for those at home. That you might be following the game and you might have high definition at home, but there's nothing like that live experience. So we want to continue to foster that for our fans, so they share that. So it helps enhance that. The live experience is definitely second to none.
Yeah.
Let me interject one thing because we saw some interesting things this year. With some NFL teams around. There's the content that's happening on the field, but there's also this other content that happens, with rookie camp or with practice footage. So we actually hooked up the New York Giants with a Live View backpack, and they had an intern running around their rookie camp and practice footage, just filming everything. Now you don't want to live stream that, right? You don't want to live stream your practice, and half the time the camera's pointing at the grass. But when you have these awesome plays, which happen every day with these athletes, you can take those clips and push them out. And the fans the engagement rates on these were fantastic for the Giants and some of the other teams that were doing it. And so I think it's not only, Brian, you mentioned the kiss cam. What if you could take that footage and let people share the fact that they were just on the kiss cam outside the stadium? It's not just the game footage. It's what's happening out. Anything that's shot with a camera can be pushed outside the stadium, and that's kind of the pregame stuff, the locker room stuff. And with today's technology, you can do that in real time, which is when the people will share it. If you share it in real time, I mean, if you guys share it in real time, or the rights holders share it in real time, then the fans will amplify it in real time. And so it's really exciting with these new capabilities.
I think once you start factoring in wearable technology into that, and my personal insane obsession rather around the data that you can get off this as well. I want body temperatures and sweat rates and heart rates and speeds and all that stuff to be infused into my experience. And actually, rugby in the internationally, Australia first, I think, with Fox, and then in the UK they've been using chest-mounted ref cams. And not going all the time, but cutting to that at still moments of play has been really fascinating. And the MLS guys for the All-Star game back in the summer, they had head-mounted ref cam all the way through. It's just fascinating insight, a fascinating way to be much closer to the experience, and I mean quite literally on the pitch, really. On the data thing, let's just bring that in because I can't resist. And I'm not going to mention datainment, but if you're bringing data into the sports, I mean, American sports, you guys love your data. Your audiences love your data. You've got a lot you can do with it. How do you integrate that data into social? And I guess also, what are the tools that you use for the best ways of sort of pulling that through? Is it just straightforward infographics, or what? What are you feeding in? Any good examples? Let's start with you, Scott. Anything? What are you pulling in on the data side?
Well, you mentioned infographics. That is one thing that we do quite a bit, and we really kind of started this year. So even I think maybe one of the best examples was, we played our last game at Candlestick Park, moving into a new venue next year. So we looked at all the data behind Candlestick, how many games have been played there, how many hot dogs have been sold. People find that information really valuable. And then from just a strategic side, using data for digital and social, while it's not necessarily the only tool that we use in terms of making our decisions, it has really helped kind of curve the conversations about how we're sending out information, how we're doing on social, and also how we're doing on digital. We use Adobe Social right now, and that tool has been really valuable for us. We're looking at data, multiple times a day, almost every half hour, every hour, seeing what's trending. How are we going to feature content on the website? What are we going to push even harder on social based off of what's trending? Because I think you kind of mentioned earlier that Mike mentioned earlier, when you have these finite moments to capitalize on fan excitement, they're so few and far between that you have a limited opportunity, and it only happens once. You have to be able to take advantage of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Brian, you got a pretty. I mean, we've been doing a lot of work with the ECB around cricket, and cricket's an incredibly data-heavy game. So is baseball. Brian,
love cricket, love it.
It's basically the same game, right? Just,
Yeah, throw 120 miles an hour and you got to hit it, right? Except your game's like 115 to 72 in the second inning, so high scoring.
Our issue is that we'll play for 5 days and we may draw, or in our case lose, and we're standing in front of the ball. You're standing miles away from the ball when it's coming past you. It's fine.
Right.
So data, usage of data. Actually, there's two things here. There's data as in the sports data and how you're integrating that into social to improve the experience. But then the other question that Scott was mentioning there about what are you doing in terms of monitoring of social data and how you're integrating that into your coverage.
Right. We also use Adobe Social, but I want to stress that there's probably a lot of people, a lot of teams here who don't have a budget or a very big budget. There's a lot of free tools out there. Topsy, until Apple changes it, Apple just bought it, but Topsy's been a great kind of social aggregator and search engine for us, just searching for trends to see what's trending. I think the analytics that both Facebook and Twitter provide on the back end are very important in learning what people like, what people are sharing. And I think for the most part, if you have someone who's dedicated, the eye test, if you're watching your tweet deck, what's got velocity, what's moving. You should have a good feel of what your fans like, and obviously taking advantage of the emotions of the game if you're in a live game. As for data surrounding, I mean, we're at I think 2014 will be a big year for sports and social. We're still learning. We've talked about how to monetize sponsorship and what do sponsors, what are they looking for? How do you measure? The CRM functions, which is above my pay scale, but merging your fans' social data with your CRM, and how do you turn that into ticket sales? How do you get to know your own customers better? I think from a sports standpoint, I think the NBA has really invested a lot, kind of the analytics of the game. Baseball's always been very statistics heavy. The history of the game, the stats. We established a stat Twitter channel that does real-time stats throughout the game. We have a vocal minority of fans that are, lack of a better term, sabermetric fans, and so we're trying to, learn more about that and how do we make our fans feel closer with the stats that we use. to kind of monitor the game. But for the most part, I think we're most excited about kind of what that data brings. And now the next step, and I think this is a huge opportunity for a lot of young people out there, is taking all this data and translating it into how teams can actively use it, whether that's figuring out new ways to engage their fan base, whether it's new ways to monetize, or is it, cracking the sponsorship code for teams and social.
Cool. Well, guys, I think we are not far off the end of our Hangout session, so I'm going to ask you the ridiculous stargazing question. I'm not going to ask you what happens in 5 years or what happens in 3 years, but if we talk again this time next year, then we've got a year. The big things for this year. I think data and the integration of both sports data and user data in a CRM way, that's a big one. But give me a tool that you think is going to be great, or a new service that's coming through you think will be strong, or a trend that you think that's coming through. Okay, I'm going to start with you, Andrew. You get the shortest time to think about it, but give me an idea.
I really think that the understanding how to better integrate video. I think Vine is interesting. I think Instagram video is interesting. But in the same way that I think Twitter's great because it's so simple. It's short text. Instagram and Facebook or photos, and video. I think that we're still in the nascent stages of it, and that's something that we're really looking forward to. The guys at SnappyTV obviously kind of hit a niche there, and have started to push more of that content out into social. But how we better figure out what videos and content people want and how we deliver that to them, and find usable videos from fans as well. Instagram's great for finding photos from fans, but videos is a little more touch and go. You have sometimes sort through a lot more to find something that's usable or easily translatable. I'm excited to see what kind of comes out in that space.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Mike, I'm going to come to you next, and you're not allowed to say SnappyTV is the next big thing. Right? We know that.
Yeah, we are. No, I'm just kidding. I'm going to go with an obvious one. I actually think that Facebook is going to get more serious about these, distribution and different things that they can do. I think it's a tremendous platform for media distribution and engagement. And I think that there's a lot of other things that happen and that come and go. But I think a refocus on Facebook to really kind of make the most of that platform is what I think will happen this year.
Okay, that's a good one. Scott?
Well, I think we talked a little bit about this earlier, how we kind of share the in-venue experience on social outside the stadium. People are at home and they don't have to go far to use the restroom watching a game, and they can sit on their couch. I think the next biggest thing is how sports teams evolve to really use digital and social to enhance the in-venue experience and get people to the ballpark. I think that's really going to be one challenge for all sports teams, is how to use social, digital, and new emerging technologies to really make people want to come to the games and not use that as a detractor for reasons that you shouldn't be in venue.
Interesting, yeah. And of course our colleagues in the front office who will want to see that working in a way that sells tickets, in a way that brings sponsors, all that kind of stuff's going to come through. Yeah, I totally agree. Brian, what do you think? This 2014.
I think this is going to be a big year for fan-generated content. I think brands are going to start embracing and using, fans not just as ambassadors, but as a way to market themselves. And I think the opportunities there for sponsors and teams bringing a fan-generated content together. So supporting your favorite team, wearing a fill in your sponsor hat contest type of thing. Video contests. I think there's going to be a lot of fan-generated content now that there's so many different channels. I also think this is going to be a big year for live streaming. I think we've seen some great examples out there. This week the WWE announced a streaming 24-hour channel. Very intriguing. I know, Mike, you mentioned the content that's in and around us all the time with access to our minor league camps. The content in and around. I know Paul Hodges of SMG Productions has got some ideas for the Giants. So I think there's teams are going to start realizing all the content that their fans have access to on a live basis or even an archival basis, but the technology is there for us to access that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and Craig, you work across a range of sports, and you've been doing this quite a long time in a range of teams. What are the kinds of trends that you're seeing coming through?
I'm thankful I was the last person to answer, so I had a little more time to think.
I'm good to you.
I would say the application of moments is going to be really big in social next year, and probably through video. If you look at SnappyTV and what they were able to do with a lot of sports properties like the U.S. Open, showing tennis highlights, with the NBA Finals, I think right now social video is used a lot more just for poignant moments or big moments in the season. I think it's going to become an integral part of an entire season. So you're not just seeing, World Series moments through video, big moments, but you're going to see throughout the season. That to me is sort of the biggest trend. And then I think the other thing is social everywhere. We've all talked about it on this panel. How are we getting social integrated more into stadium? How are we getting it more into sponsors? And most importantly, how are we integrating social more into the overall digital experience, whether that's a website or an app? I think everyone's just right now in an arms race to figure out the best tools and the best ways to integrate social into every way that they have a touch point with a fan.
Okay, absolutely, yeah. And the interesting thing for me there is that none of us have specifically said revenue, right? Nobody's jumped at what's going to be the big thing we're going to do in 2014. Yep, we're going to start making revenue from it. Now you've got the Twitter IPO happening, and I wonder whether they're going to bring in anything that's some sort of filtering technology. I mean, who knows? Some sort of structuring thing. Actually, that's a kind of a perverse world where you have a Twitter EdgeRank or EdgeRank equivalent. That might be a very strange experience. But the reach and retention areas that we still seem to be in seems to be driving a lot of the business logic at the moment. And you guys work for some of the most advanced sports bodies in the world, in one of the most advanced markets in the world. So it'll be interesting for me to see what FC Barcelona, Manchester United, and that's just to name two. There are lots of other European and international sports bodies who've got huge audiences who are going to start to come through. I mean, if the IPL in India, or I'm not sure what the equivalent would be in China, starts to get hold of, using this kind of technology in these ways, then we're talking massive audiences, and maybe that'll kick into making a big difference on revenue as well. I'm looking for other questions from the floor, or indeed. Hold on a minute. 5 minutes left. Feel free to wrap up at any point now. That's what they've said. I've got the instruction. So, any last thoughts from you guys before we say thank you and good night?
I'm going to say thank you and good night. My plane is leaving. I will see Andrew in a few hours. I'm actually going to meet him for drinks tonight in New York City. So this is.
See you there, Brian.
Yeah, thanks to #Sports and Steve Cobb and Activate for this is an awesome conference. I'm going to try to log on from the plane, and thanks to everyone on the panel. So I'm going to leave before they leave me. So thank you, Richard. You did a great job. You did a great job.
Thank you, Brian. Travel well. All right. And then there were 5, and we're going to do that thing like that symphony where gradually everybody leaves one by one. I think we all forgot to say the one thing that's going to be very big in 2014 was Hangouts.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh well, there we go.
That's worked pretty well. This is my first one. It's a decent experience. I have to. The thing that's on our mind is the big game up in Seattle this week, and having the Niners take it home. So that's not a plug for this, but it's a plug for growing up a Niners fan. So that's it's going to be a big deal.
I like that, Mike. Your quest for 6 rally towels in the mail.
All right, guys. Thank you to everybody who's watching. Feel free to pick up the conversation online. So the hashtag is #SportsConf2014. You've got our Twitter handles on the #Sports website. I have no doubt that every one of us is going to be available to chat and keep the conversation going. So thanks very much to all you guys as speakers. Thank you to the audience. Thank you to the #Sports and the Google guys for organizing.
Thank you.
Thanks,
guys. Good job. Thanks so much, Richard.
Good job.
Thank you.
Take care.